Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. May I invite all of you to please take your seats? A warm welcome to the Net Zero Singapore Sustainability Academy for our Embracing SBTi to Advance Net Zero Built Environment event, as well as all those who have joined us online from different parts of the world. Before we begin, may I invite CDL Chief Sustainability Officer and World Green Building Council Corporate Advisory Committee Chairperson, Ms. Esther An, to give opening remarks. Esther, please.
Hello, good afternoon and Happy New Year's to all. And well, definitely greeting from Singapore with a lot of energy, for the year of the rabbit. And but the world is still facing climate emergency, and we all know the high impact of our industry. And you all know all those numbers about we are accounting for about 40% of global greenhouse gas emission. And decarbonization is very, very key to tackle this existential threat to humanity. But unfortunately, the building and construction sector didn't perform very well. In 2021, we actually hit a new high in terms of energy and process related emissions. But there's always hope. The sectors, definitely more companies will need to step up, whether you are in the industry or not. We need to make the systemic transformation in the way we design, we procure material, we build and we manage properties. And whether you are in the industry, you live, work and own a work and use a building. And this session will deep dive into how businesses can take action by setting science-based reduction targets, and also by adopting green building technologies and solutions. And according to International Energy Agency, this decade will need to move faster and by quadrupling current levels of investments to $4 trillion a year. 4 trillion a year. So there's a lot of potential for sustainable finance to accelerate green building agenda. And the real estate sector and related sector can certainly work together to set ambitious targets. And we believe that with technologies and solutions that are available today, it will require stronger commitment, from the national industry, business, and the financial sector to drive change. And in fact, in 2018, World Green Building Council has the foresight to launch the Advancing Net Zero commitment in 2018. That was, before COVID and before, all this, so-called climate emergency is in our face. And we have also raised the bar to adopt whole life carbon during COP26 at Glasgow. And this is aligned with SBTi's approach to set reduction targets that cover scope 1, 2, and 3. And in Singapore, although we are only accounting for a very small footprint globally, 0.14% of the carbon emission, but Singapore has raised our NDC just before COP27 and pledged to net zero by 2050 as a nation. And as a company, CDL is very honored to have taken the bold but necessary step to be the first company in Southeast Asia to pledge and sign on the World Green Building Council Net Zero building commitment and join the global race to zero since 2021. And decarbonization require a lot of collaboration, and that is why this building, some of you may be the first time here, and this is called the Singapore Sustainability Academy. It was designed and built by CDL with the support of 6 government agencies and 15 industry and NGO partners, and it was opened in 2017. Since then, we have actually hosted and organized 700 events and training sessions, including those by our partner. Behind that door, you see the sign SEAS, the Sustainable Energy Association Singapore, and this was built to the highest level of Green Mark Platinum level. And what you can see here, the monitor here, you can see is a real-time tracker. The top bar is actually tracking the solar energy from January 1st, generated from our rooftop 3,200 square feet of solar panel. And the blue bar is what we have used. And from our past few years, we always have excess, and whatever excess is channeled back to the mall. So now today, we're really, really happy. I'm really very thankful to our partners, CDP, SBTi, and of course, World Green Building Council, and we'll bring together their expertise to help some of our partners who really want to step up in their target setting, tracking the performance, and also finding solutions to decarbonize our built environment. And without further ado, I will pass this back to the MC, and we will start the ball rolling. Thank you so much.
Hi there, everyone. Good morning from here in France. It's very early in the morning and very cold, and I wish I could be there with you in Singapore, maybe next time, hopefully next time. But yes, greetings. My name is Victoria Burrows. I'm the Director of Advancing Net Zero at the World Green Building Council that Esther's kindly already mentioned. So thank you very much. And a huge thank you to the support of CDL and your continued leadership in our journey. I'd start by just sharing this image on screen, which is of course a building from Grab, something that you will hopefully be very familiar with, you know, a super app in Southeast Asia, actually a very recent joiner to the net zero carbon buildings commitment that Esther just mentioned earlier. So fantastic to see more companies from within Asia joining this leadership initiative, which I will explain a little bit more about. First of all, as Esther has mentioned, we need change, and we need it now in order to tackle the enormous impacts of the building and construction sector. And the World Green Building Council is operating around 3 key impact areas that we're targeting in order to help facilitate that transition to a more sustainable built environment for everyone, everywhere. And those are climate action, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, resources and circularity, and health, well-being, and social equity. And we just need to be taking action in these 3 areas. It's critical, as Esther's already mentioned, but it will also help us achieve better environments for our people, our health, our communities, our schools, our homes and offices. So we believe that these are really 3 critical areas that need focus over the next few years. And with our levers for change around advocacy, so calling for better regulations from governments at all levels, and our involvement in COP27 and others, but also the role of sustainable finance in facilitating and driving that change towards achieving our goals for the sector. And we do that with our network of fantastic green building councils around the world. Of course, Singapore GBC being one of 77 GBCs in our network, representing more than 40,000 members, the largest action network on green buildings in the world. And we simply have to be taking the sorts of actions we're going to be talking about today to help move that needle on emissions, as Esther mentioned. So Advancing Net Zero is a global campaign to accelerate total decarbonisation by 2050, which is not a small challenge. It's an enormous feat. We need to completely and radically change the way that we've been building buildings, operating them, and valuing them in terms of carbon. And the Advancing Net Zero campaign is a program from the World Green Building Council that brings together green building councils. It helps to increase awareness and education of both the urgency and achievability of net zero buildings, and they are popping up all over the world, including, of course, in Singapore. to achieve alignment and commonality between the different approaches and certification schemes from GBCs around the world. And then finally, to expedite uptake in global markets by sharing market leadership examples and creating that confidence and inspiring companies to take action because we believe that this is possible. So we have a whole life carbon framework that combines the concepts of operational carbon and embodied carbon. Starting with operational carbon, that's of course the carbon associated with the energy that we use to heat and cool and power and light our buildings. We have to think about energy efficiency as the first fuel, the way that we need to reduce our energy consumption. We will not solve this problem by simply decarbonising our energy supplies. So we need to focus on reducing and optimizing energy demand. And then meeting that remaining energy demand with a balance of renewable energy. And that could be generated on site, but again, in the case of Singapore, we know that that won't go far enough. So using energy that's generated off-site and delivered via the grid to the buildings as well. And again, that's why energy efficiency is so important. World GBC believes that we also need to compensate for residual emissions and that offsets play a crucial part in the transition towards a decarbonised economy. And so if you do have, for example, gas boilers or gas cookers or diesel generators, that we should be doing something about those emissions that are being created as a result from the sector. And then planning for deep decarbonisation, particularly in the case of retrofits. If you've got buildings that aren't currently optimized for energy performance, how can you build upgrades into the maintenance and upgrade plans for that building over its short term, not entire lifetime? The embodied carbon principles that we apply follow the same reduction first approach. So firstly, how can we prevent embodied carbon emissions? Those are the emissions from materials and construction processes and transport, from where the materials are extracted through to the construction site. So how do we prevent those in the first place? Well, we don't build. And of course, that's not possible completely, but we can optimize the buildings that we can choose to renovate and refurbish before choosing to build new. Where we do need to build new, how do we reduce the amount of embodied carbon associated with the building through design measures? So, for example, lean construction, or even requiring construction sites to be fossil fuel free, as is happening across Europe. And to optimize the embodied carbon from those materials. So if we've decided we need to build, we've decided we only can use concrete, but we've reduced the amount of concrete we need. Now let's look at the type of concrete we're going to use. Are there lower embodied carbon options available to us? Planning for the future. So thinking about how a building can be adapted over its lifetime so that we don't need to be moving in and out and refitting a building a lot, but it can be moved around. The internal partitions, for example, can be moved around. Thinking about the circular economy, sometimes you can have facade panels that can be hired, not bought, and they can be replaced. That gives the building a facelift and feels like a new building, but maintains that core structure where most of that embodied carbon is held. And think about how a building could be deconstructed. So like a Lego building, how it can be taken apart and those materials retained and reused in another project rather than demolishing. And again, inevitable when thinking about whole life embodied carbon is that we need to compensate for residual emissions. We cannot build buildings without creating emissions. And for us, it's important about what we do about those emissions when they occur. So we have a vision that we should achieve by 2050, all new buildings, infrastructure and renovations have net zero embodied carbon, and that all buildings, including existing, are net zero operational carbon. And as I've mentioned, that is an enormous challenge. It cannot happen overnight. And that's why we've introduced the net zero carbon buildings commitment, which is encouraging businesses and organizations to take that lofty 2050 target and achieve it by 2030, and in some cases sooner. Because the types of measures and actions that they are taking with their buildings in order to help achieve those targets helps us understand a huge amount about what needs to change in our sector, the different business models, what tools do we need, what skills do we need to deliver these targets at scale. And so organizations like CDL and others in the room will be familiar with this process that you're going through to understand, how do I get my buildings to decarbonize as soon as possible? And what you're learning from that process helps us to share that information and insights with other organizations, and hopefully we'll have more companies taking the same leadership action. So green building councils around the world take that vision, the framework, the principles, the definition, the goals, and they create local tools or knowledge or frameworks and resources to help their members understand, what does this mean locally? And of course, that means something different in different climatic zones, in different countries, even countries next door to each other, that might have completely different regulatory frameworks and need to tackle this challenge slightly differently. So the green building councils are extremely well placed to take that high level vision and create localized content and guidance that's available for their members. And we celebrate this progress and success, the work of the green building councils, the work of commitment signatories of our partners, the progress that's being made in terms of policy and regulation, but also trends and innovations from the market in our status report each year. And there's a great piece in there about the progress being made in Asia Pacific. And we are already busy working on this year's report. So if you have stories that you want us to share, then please do send them through. We'd love to celebrate them in this year's status report. So we've mentioned, I think, COP27. It was a really significant moment for us. It gives us the opportunity to tell governments that they need to be taking action on the built environment, and they need to take it seriously as a sector that's viable and ripe for change. We had more than 200 events about the built environment, and they included a ministerial meeting on urbanization and climate change, all the way through to the launch of an African Alliance for Sustainable Cities and Built Environments, and the launch of the Roof Over Our Heads campaign, which is all about ensuring that everyone in the world has a safe and secure place to call home. So we're really making sure that on a global stage, we're bringing the examples of organizations that are already taking action, that they've made commitments, but are delivering on those commitments. And we have some regular news and communications activities that help us share that progress throughout the year. And finally, I just want to mention, because I know we're here to talk about SBTi, and we'll hear more from others in a moment, that there is a program, a piece of work that we're involved in with science-based targets around science-based target setting in the building sector, with some work that's due to come out towards the end of this year in Q3, I believe. We're part of that expert advisory group, and there's 3 objectives. The first one is to develop a 1.5 degree pathway for in-use emissions for the global building sector. The second is to develop that guidance for embodied emissions. And then thirdly, developing guidance for emissions target setting, accounting, and reporting specific to stakeholders within the building and construction sector. And so we're busy working away on that, and hope to be able to share with you something later on in the year. And, with the likes of Creme and Ramboll working on refining pathways for the building sector, it really helps us understand what good looks like in line with what science is telling us we need to do in terms of emission reductions. So the final point from me is to consider what action your organization can take. Esther said we need to move, and we need to move fast. So whether you are able to set a science-based target by 2050, whether you're able to set a target for 2040 and sign the climate pledge, even better, 10 years earlier, whether you're able to sign up to the net zero carbon buildings commitment from Advancing Net Zero, no matter what type of business you are, there is an initiative that can help you in that journey and ensure that you are helping the market make that transition. So join us in leading that transition to a sustainable and decarbonized built environment for everyone, everywhere. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Victoria. Now, may I please invite Ms. Joy Guy, Asia Pacific Programs Head at the World Green Building Council, to share her presentation. Joy, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Outside is a little bit gloomy, but I can feel that the positive energy inside of the room. We're full of hope. We're full of a lot of positive notes as well, right? So I'm Joy Guy from the World Green Building Council. I'm the head of the Asia Pacific Network and also behind the joy of sustainability, bring positive psychology into the built environment. So I'm here today to share with you the story of Asia Pacific in terms of advancing net zero. So, is it open? Like, how do I open? Right, okay, technology. Okay, coming. Right, it's open. Right. So, by show of hands, how many of you in this room, I don't know, in the Zoom, you can actually show your hands as well, believe that you know exactly how to achieve net zero by 2050? Come on. Right, great. We have, the percentage is a bit low. Anyone, any hands up in the Zoom? Come on. Right, let's just change another question. By show of hands, how many of you believe that the organization you're working with and of the industry is able to achieve net zero by 2050? Great, that's what we are here for. Right, that's what you're committed. This is what you are here to really help the industry achieve this ultimate goal, right? Are we ready to unpack further? So we know that all these data, like give you some of the data from the COP, from all these reports, the message is very clear. We're just not done enough yet. And that's all. Right, you can read all these and then walk away saying, like, I need to do more. That's what we want to inspire you with. So World Green Building Council is a network that we're actually the largest network in the global regional sector network in the building industry, that we have more than 70 green building councils around the world, and we have 17 green building councils in the Asia Pacific as well. So in the way, like within the strong network with World Green Building Council, we have 3 key areas that we need to focus on. So climate action, health and well-being, resource and circularity are the key strategy areas I also mentioned by Victoria. So with these 3 categories, we actually aim to drive change, because when we're being part of the United Nations, our goal is to translate the achievement of Paris Agreement into the building sector. So in that way, our goal is to make change. And I'm sure that a lot of you in your work area, your goal is to drive change as well. After COVID, we need to change. Before COVID, even more changes. Change management, change of your mode of working, a lot of mindset change, a lot of industry change. We all need to manage changes, and the only constant thing is change. So in our network, especially at our position, how do we drive change? So this is the question that we actually thought about for a very long time. Although, of course, I'm here for 2 years, but I did learn about a lot of things that help people make changes. So in the World Green Building Council, we make change through our strong network. We have our green building councils, we have our dear partners, we have a lot of our knowledge partners behind. We also have a lot of partnership with all these organizations. So through the network, we collaborate. We also educate, we advocate, we communicate like today, and eventually we influence the industry to make the movement. So change management is definitely not easy, but we definitely hope to have this collaboration together like today to move the industry forward. So because we have a strong network across, so we just wanted to give you a little sense about what other regions are looking at. But in this particular summary, we're very pleased that this year, after we have run the survey with our green building councils, the top 5 action item and top 5 focus area in the Asia Pacific network is very promising. The first thing we're looking at is the building energy efficiency, right? So we know, because if you want to lose weight, you have to eat less. That's why if you wanted to achieve net zero, you need to look at your energy efficiency, less demand, and also increase the efficiency as well. So this is the most important thing that we need to focus in order to achieve the rest of the goals behind. And then at the same time, there's also no surprise that our Asia Pacific network focusing on the green finance, which we'll also talk about later. Why? Because this is the driver. We cannot ignore the finance that driving this industry. We cannot stop working with the financial institute to support the industry. So we need them to enable us, but we also need to work with us to help them understand what do we do? How can we help them to make money in the way that they're not investing, but without return. So that's why communication and collaboration with the finance industry is one of the crucial things that we're working together with. And then the next thing is the government incentive or regulations for sustainable buildings. Again, from the Green Building Council's perspective, definitely working with the government, influencing the policy is one of their key work. But at the same time, they also need to see that how the government is taking the action steps further. If the industry is running very far behind, but government is still there observing what is happening, it's definitely not going to happen. So that's why we always need to have a communication, a dialogue with the government, and then to influence how the policy is able to take place and be sustainable along the way. So, and the fourth thing is talk about embodied carbon. I was talking to Dedy as well. So embodied carbon is a very sensitive topic because a lot of people don't know how. And I admit that. We don't know exactly how do you track the embodied carbon, what are the things you can do. But these are the knowledge gap that we have to knowledge and we have to close together. So although we always talk about embodied carbon, but we just need to have you in the awareness that this is something very important for us to close with. And this is something is a knowledge gap that we need to learn together. The industry needs to work together with all of you to close this embodied carbon gap and to figure out how we can achieve net zero of embodied carbon by 2050 together, right? So the last one is talk about sustainable and net zero building because we need case studies. We need great case studies to show us that it can be done. Just now the show of hands. Come on, we can do better, right? We hope to have more of this net zero building to show that we can do so, right? So we talk about influencing the government. We have actually a lot of green building councils taking the lead to communicate well with the government. Singapore Green Building Council is working very closely with BC as well. So these are the samples about how we're able to influence from the upstream and then to the industry. Every one of you also has the chance to influence the government and to have this regulation and policy in favor of our goal. So we know that advancing net zero is the project that is the leading project in World Green Building Council. So that's why for us, it's very crucial for us to drive the industry towards achieving the advancing net zero. Start here. Did I say something wrong? Right. Could anyone help? Thank you so much. Right. So Victoria has a very detailed pathway, a lot of principles as well. If you wanted to learn more, you can always go to our website. We can download the Net Zero Annual Report. It has all the details and also the explanations in our annual report. So if there's any question, you can definitely come back to us to clarify. So I should point here, right? So I know what there. Is that the aim? Oh, right. Yeah, right. Pointing here. Okay, so why we need commitment, why we want the sectors to work together with us, because we see it's a loop. It's not the linear things that your action triggers the next action until you achieve the goal, but you can see that this becomes a loop. For example, when CDL become the signatory, they will be more motivated and more energized to do something new. And they would speak to this to all the industry partners. They will start to share more of their knowledge, and they'll try everything they can in order to achieve their commitment goal. So with that action of the commitment, it's already triggering the organization like CDL to influence other companies like them. So everyone else has started to learn, oh, Esther has done well. I wanted to learn from her. I wanted to do exactly the same as her or even better. So you can start to see the industry start to have this positive momentum and outcome. And this is the things that we wanted to see. And then when we have more and more people talk about this until they forget about it was Esther do the first, that's actually the best moment because the government started to look at this. Oh, the industry is actually more mature. what we're looking at sustainability net zero is become something like a norm. Everyone knows how to do a net zero already. Everyone needs to do a net zero building from now on. Then the government will be more triggered to make a policy. They will revamp the green mark, and they will also have the super low energy building. They have more net zero energy building. And you can see that these actions that become even more clear for the government to commit on this. Once we have that, it will trigger the finance institute like OCBC, UOB, and all these people say, this is something I need to invest with because everyone is doing so. And it actually making great sense for me to be related with sustainability industry. If I don't invest in a green project, it actually means I'm not trendy. So you can see the finance institute start to also have this attention and start to invest in the industry. In that way, it actually trigger back to a CDL. They can even do more. They can even do better. They can invest more. You can see this positive loop started to form. This is why we are actually we're influencing everyone, change the word, to really take forward, to make the commitment. Because your action, your decision, whatever you're doing is able to move this entire loop in the positive way. And we cannot afford to stuck and pause here. So that's actually the strongest message we would like to send to everyone. Can we move to the next slide, please? Right, so Asia Pacific is actually a very important market for advancing net zero. First of all, because we have the largest population, and we're also expected for the Asia Pacific to develop rapidly in the future. The next 10 years will be very crucial for everyone because we'll see a lot of developments coming. A lot of developing countries in the Asia Pacific will be having massive like eco-city and big master plan. So with that kind of development pace and that kind of volume, we cannot afford to make things wrong in the first place. So that's why we need to make things right in the first place, because we cannot reverse this anymore. So this is actually a very crucial time for us to look into advancing net zero and doing things in advance to make sure that we have a good positive ground now. Right, next please, thank you. So we are working, we need support. We need a strong network. We have our regional partners, AGC, and also we have Henderson Land join us this year. We have our knowledge partner, CDL, always being our most sweet support in the World Green Building Council. Thank you so much. And we also have our net zero collaborators working with us for one of the crucial projects, which is net zero readiness framework. And next, please. So one of our projects in the Asia Pacific network from the World Green Building Council is this Asia Pacific Net Zero Readiness Framework. So we know that if we are pointing you to the end of the rainbow, it sounds a little bit too far for everyone to really know how to go. So from the psychology perspective, people start to say like, it's too far. Okay, so then I don't want to go. So it's actually because when we make it very far, people start to find the fear. They don't know what they don't know, and they will start to paralyze their action. So that's why we decided, how about we hold your hand? How about we help you to develop what can you make you more ready? And how can we help you to take a step forward, step by step, to look at how can we get closer to our ultimate goal? So that is why we're developing this net zero readiness framework. It consists of 5 different categories. Government leadership, which is very crucial, had technical solutions and approaches, which everyone is cared about. We have finance, which is a very important enabler. We have data, without reporting, that nothing can do. We even have the mindset, because a lot of time it's because our mindset tell us it's not possible, but it's not because it's not possible. So we also wanted to address our mindset, so it can actually help this loop to move forward. And moving to the next, this readiness framework is already available in our World Green Building Council website under the Asia Pacific category. You have the net zero readiness framework. It has unpacked into all these readiness goals. A little bit similar and compared with the 17 SDG goal, but we're actually more specific towards advancing net zero. And with these 5 categories. And click one more time, you will be able to see that each of these readiness goals, click one more time, and we'll be able to see that it extended into more indicators to help you see what are the categories that you need to achieve in order to achieve this readiness goal. This is not the assessment that we're not here to mark your homework. We're not here to assess whether you're good or better, but we're here to give you a little guidance about where do you need to channel your attention on. Because if you don't know what you don't know, and you see that my goal is very far, then it's nothing you can do. But if we have unfolded this into a very detailed way, according to the 5 categories, you know where your gap is, then you will channel your energy towards what is needed for your action. So that's actually is our goal. You can actually take a look into all these readiness goals. This year, we're still developing some of the other action, some of other indicators. We have already completed the government leadership and technical solutions. We'll be focusing on finance data this year and maybe mindset starting from the end of this year. So we also urge the organization to step forward to help us continue verifying and also develop this readiness framework as well. So when we're developing the readiness framework, we also see that, so we also did some of the industry feedback. I'm not sure whether any of you has joined our webinar in June 2 years ago, when we actually just launched the Net Zero Readiness Framework. We also invited the industry partners to help us verify all these readiness goals. I think Alex was there. So we map all these readiness goals according to 4 phases. If it's very important, if it's very likely, you will fall into that let's go action zone. Because it's very important and it's feasible to achieve, then what are you waiting for, right? So something that in the action zone. If the readiness goal is in the very important and less likely to achieve, we see this is as a gap zone. So you know it's important, but you just don't know how to do so. So that's your gap. Which actually triggered the government or the organization to look at can they close the gap. So that's the intention. If it's not important and more likely to achieve, means it's easy but not important, then maybe it's a low priority. Don't waste your energy into something not so important, although it's easy to achieve. So that's why we say that it falls into the low priority. If it's not important, not likely, just forget about it. What's the point, right? So after we have consolidated all the survey data with all the experts we have in the Asia Pacific region, country by country, we have worked with 7 green building councils. We have hosted 8 webinars and workshops for that. Very good news is all of our net zero readiness framework, readiness goals in Asia Pacific network fall into the action zone, which makes it very promising and very positive for us to focus on what we need to focus on. And it's actually very interesting that after Asia Pacific has this net zero readiness framework, we also started to try in other regions. So we have done this in the America region. We're also trying this out in the Middle East and Africa region. So the fresh return of the survey from the America region shows that actually a lot of their data are in the gap zone. Actually worth thinking, because in Asia Pacific, we seems more ready, and then the achievement of all these readiness goals seems more likely compared with other regions, which give us a very important signal that we can move faster and we are able to move faster as well. It's time to demonstrate that things can be done. Right, so next. So these are the raw data that we have plotted after we have consolidated the survey data with everyone. We didn't modify anything, so you can scan the QR code. There is a whole lot of data of all the feedback from our industry. They talk about what are the challenges. They talk about what do they see about this framework. They also talk about how do they see in order for other, in terms of other readiness, other category as well. So these are very valuable data we have collected so far. It's reflecting our region's readiness at this moment. Right, so next. So we have took the efforts to reconsolidate to see how do we read from those raw data. So first of all, we compare with these 6 green building councils, and also these are the feedback from their experts. We realize that there's something very, very important that we need to look into. First one is that everyone wanted to see what is the true definition of net zero. Although we thought we know, and although we thought I think it's clear, but a lot of industry experts feel that it's not clear enough. So actually trigger us to really reflect what is a net zero definition that we need to agree upon. And they also say that we need to set a very clear net zero the benchmark of different types of building, so they know where are they. And also another thing is the accessibility, what's it called? The net zero target tool, and also the public declaration. So these are the things, the benchmarking and also the definition are the things we see are the key top priority for most of the green building councils. So in the next slides, we can see that some of them also see a lot of gap, a little bit of gap. So these are the points that are in closer to the gap zone. So we still extracted out for those are the gap. So we can see that the gaps are common across different regions. First of all, most of them think the government needs to establish a emission target. And thankfully, Singapore has done so recently. And they also say that it should have a mandatory requirement and also performance requirements relating to net zero. And at this moment, it's not mandatory yet. And then the last thing throughout every region is they have lack of the accessibility to renewable energy. Agree? Yeah, I also agree. Yeah, so again, whoever is working in the renewable energy industry, anyone working? You are the future, okay? Everyone needs it. Okay, so we now have a sense about what are the important things that is action steps, what are the gaps that needed to close in the future. So we also wanted to consolidate that these are the top challenges we are looking at, and these are the top 3 action steps we encourage everyone to do. So again, this is definitely not something like you have to put in your corporate some of the planning, but this is definitely advising you to take a note about, because to address the upfront cost is the challenge. You need to work closely with the Finance Institute. Lack of appealing business model is very important, because you need to really figure out how can you make business sense of the renewable energy. It's not the social sense, but it needs to be in the business sense as well. And then what are the mindset and the behavior change you need to have? This room is not that cold, right? We can always open up and have these windows. This is the basic mindset that we need to adjust ourselves with. And then the last one is to have the accessibility to renewable energy. We need to encourage more and more people working in your industry. There are only 2 of you, so we should have more. So that's why we have more resource to supply and to achieve the net zero. And then the top to-do list may be something that can consider, and you can always refer back to our raw data in order for you to generate what are the next things. So World Green Building Council is also here to support everyone. We're here to hold hands together. We hope we're able to see, my dream is by when I'm 70 years old, and then it's 2050. Okay, never mind, I should give too much of the information. But then I hope to see net zero and really happening in this industry. So we hope we're also building this APN Asia Pacific Knowledge Hub to share with everyone what has the Green Building Councils done, what our knowledge partners, wonderful things is happening. So we hope that you can visit our website and then learn more about what is happening in the region and keep yourself active in contributing to this global goal. So I wanted to end this slide with one of the big lists. So first of all, I wanted to thank everyone for your attention and really thank everyone to be part of this global movement. We also wanted to give special thank you for all these organizations like CDL, like all of you, that take forward. You don't know what is in front of you, but you're bold enough to make a decision that I wanted to be the front runner. So as the everyday running, right? She sacrificed herself to make the industry as what we're today, right? So we really wanted to thank everyone who put your heart, put your career, put your passion and your ambition into this industry to achieve the global goal that is for the humankind. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joy, for the insightful sharing. Now, may I please invite Dedy Mahardika, SBT Engagement Manager of Southeast Asia and Oceania at CDP, to share his insights on carbon reporting and target setting. Dedy, please.
Yeah, okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's really nice to meet you here. Today, I think it's really pressure for us from CDP to be invited. I guess a little bit anecdote here, right? I met Esther, I think it was like in 2021, right? At 2021, it was like, we don't know yet what is actually SBTi during that time. During that time, I think there's only 2 companies in Southeast Asia. One of them is CDL. And during that time, Esther already leading this initiative, and also it's been pleasure working with Esther. And today probably Victoria and also Joy already shared about the building side of the story. Probably I will take more about what is actually Science-Based Targets Initiative, taking about the net zero, which is actually a marketing tools at this point. But right now, I think we want to deep dive into what is actually net zero and what does it mean by setting your target in line with science here. So right now, a big background of the Science-Based Targets Initiative. If you're not familiar with, Science-Based Targets Initiative is a collaborative effort between 4 partners here. Me from CDP, but also with WWF, UN Global Compact, and also DBRI, also along with the Women Business Coalitions here. The goal is actually pretty simple, to help company decarbonize decarbonization pathways to be in line with the science here. When we're talking about the science, of course, it is about the IPCC report, IEA report, and also something like that, but also how to really get into the ambitious action that still keep the global warming to 1.5 degrees here. So it's been a good journey since 2015. It is being, founded at the same time as the Paris Agreement, and right now it's being one of the gold standard when the company wants to do the emission reductions in line with the science. Yep, this is the progress to date. If you may see on the screen right now, we're a global, movement that we see almost 4,500 companies right now joining the initiative. And beside that one, we have 2,200 companies with the validated target, which means that almost half of them have the target being validated to be in line with the science. And aside from that one, we have also almost 1,700 companies joining the initiative as a net zero, which means they do more than the science-based target, which is a medium target between 5 to 10 years, but they also, as Joy mentioned, also to commit to the net zero by 2050 or before here. Let's do a big background of the buildings value chain here. Joy and also Victoria mentions, and also Esther a couple of times, that building value chain is a difficult, and we need to admit that this is a difficult sector to working with, but we see that the total combined of the scope 1 and 2 emissions from the company joining the initiative right now exceeding 793 million tons of CO2 here. And in terms of the companies, right now we have almost 900 companies taking action. Of course, this is to emphasizing also that the companies right now seeing the SBTi as one of the strategy on how to really align with the pathways here. And we see also during the COP27 last year that the number of companies committing to SBTi, also target setting, increasing due to the US government to have SBTi requirement. So again, the power of policy actually very important here. Esther also mentioned that it is important for us to align with the policymaker and how to align this voluntary initiative with the, the overall regulations. Yeah, this is a further breakdown of the buildings value chain. You may see that probably expected that the champion of the SBTi in general is still in the Europe and also North America. But we see that Asia is also a champion here. Asia accounts for the second in terms of the number companies. We have 169 companies joining the initiative, whether it's a committed companies or target validated. And we see that almost 200 million tons of CO2 from scope 1 and 2. Here, of course, the discussion around the embodied carbon that becoming a Voldemort kind of in this space, getting there and there. But I guess the scope 1, 2, and 3 initiative like this is covering a lot more than this one. Of course, this is still a good practice, but we see that Asia is a good market to explore more companies joining the initiative. Yep, let's circle back and to go into what is actually the science-based targets here. Science-based target here is being co-founded by the in 2015. during the Paris Agreement here. So a simple case, probably, if you're referring to the country's commitments, you may go to the Paris Agreement. But the equalization of the Paris Agreement for the companies that want to be aligned with them is actually to set with the Science-Based Targets Initiative. So we provide the pathways for companies that want to be in line with the decarbonization journey, which is to set the target to be in line with the 1.5 degrees Celsius. Last year, we made an improvement of the requirement. So previously, the company can still join the initiative by aligning with the well below 2 degrees Celsius pathway, which is almost equal to 1.75 degrees Celsius. But of course, we see that IPCC report said this is not enough. Well below 2 degrees is not enough. Therefore, we raised the bar to 1.5 degrees Celsius as the minimum requirement. Yeah, and this is a bit technical, although hopefully this little animation will help you know more about the SBTi. So, of course, the science itself says that the global climate scenario need to stay below 2 degrees or 1.5 degrees global warming. What we're trying to do is actually to analyze what we analyze as the carbon budget here. So you see the bucket here. I always like to visualize the emissions of the greenhouse gases as the water in a bucket. So we have a bucket that is almost full right now. You may see that the historic emitted greenhouse gases is almost, fulfilling the overall bucket, and we have a small amount remaining budget greenhouse gases, this is the amount that of the greenhouse gases that can still be emitted to the atmosphere without exceeding the 1.5 degrees Celsius. This remaining budget of greenhouse gases actually being translated again into the company level. So the company will know how much they still can emit, how much they need to reduce to be in line with 1.5 here. So this is the idea of the global emission budget and how we can align with the science-based targets. Yeah, this is the nitty-gritty of the presentation, I guess. What is actually the net zero standard here? So from the Joy presentation, also one of the concern from the audience also is that the net zero definition is pretty bold right here. So the SBTi actually launching the SBTi net zero standard during the COP26, and we already validated many companies that target in line with the SBTi net zero standard. First thing first, although SBTi net zero standard is a long-term target, the company needs to take responsibility to also reduce as much and as soon as possible here. So you may see that the first step of setting the SBTi net zero is to set the near-term targets, which is 5 to 10 years of the emission reductions. The second one, of course, the obvious one, to set the long-term science-based targets initiative, which should be 1.5 degrees Celsius pathways by 2050 or before. Of course, we will advise many companies also actually setting the net zero by 2040 or even 2035, something like that one. But the minimum requirement is to do net zero by 2050. And then while the company doing some of the decarbonization pathways, they may consider to what we call as the beyond value chain mitigation. So probably in the carbon space, this is being referred as the offsetting project, which is basically purchasing a good carbon outside of the value chain. You may see here that the step number 1, 2, and 4 is the required steps, but for number 3 is a recommendation here. So we still want to recommend company if they already reduce their own emissions and to be in line with the decarbonization pathways that are recommended, and they have some financial, incentive that they would go to the offset, we'll still recommend that one. But of course, the offsetting cannot be counted as the net zero achievement here. Lastly, you may see number 4 here. There are still small gap by 2050, what we call as the unabated emission, which means that we acknowledge the company still need to reduce as much as possible, but sometimes there are some possibility that the reduction is not possible, what we call as the unabated emission. And that 5% of unabated emission here need to be neutralized with what we call as the removals here. So eventually what is meant by the net zero is that to reach the state where the emission reduction is the same with the removals of the carbon here. Yeah, this is just to quickly give you pick what is actually the methodology that we're doing within the SBTi. So in general, we have two targets that can be used by the company. The first one is the carbon intensity coverage, which is basically the sector specific. Therefore, you may see that it is depending on the baseline of the company. So if the company already have the baseline that are low in terms of the emissions, they will need to reduce less compared to their peers here. And this is, of course, apply for the homogeneous sectors. And one of them is the building here. That Victoria actually mentioned that the building, right now we're updating the guidance by this year. Hopefully we'll have the updated guidance. And then for our other sector that are more heterogeneous than the mentioned here, they can use the absolute contraction, which is basically a simple math that the company needs to reduce the emission by certain amount of percentage by by certain amount of time here. And this two can be combined for the development of the science-based targets. Yep, this is also the questions that I got a lot here. What is actually SBT, what SBTi does, and also what we are not doing here. The first one, of course, the SBTi does is to provide the basis to validate whether the target is ambitious enough or in line with the science or not here. So you may see that in the SBTi website, you may see that the company X commits to a certain amount of the emission reductions from scope 1 and 2 to be in line with the science here. So we do provide the validations. The second one also, every company's individual case is taken into account. Therefore, we're not really having tailored target validation for each sector, but rather than we do case by company, because we want to assess deeply what is their baseline and also whether the journey is necessary for them. What we don't provide actually is that the roadmap of the technology. So I guess this is going back to the presentation from Joy that, of course, when we're doing commitments and validating the target, they can do the SBTi, and then you can go to Joy directly when talking about the how to deliver those targets. And we don't have also product level certification because we focusing much on the company level as well as the building level certification, which is going back again to Joy. Yeah, I think I will pass this just to give you as SBTi criteria here. So the boundary here for scope 1 and 2 need to cover 95% of emissions. And then the time frame, as I mentioned, is 5 to 10 years. And if the company want to go beyond, which is net zero, it should be it should be on 2050 or before. And then the reporting also, which is important. Once the company actually setting the target, they need to report publicly through the platform like CDP or other public platforms. And then there are requirements also that I talked to Joy also. The scope 3, which is, it is also kind of tricky when we're talking with the building companies, because most of the one probably, they see scope 3 as not really materiality. So there are some initial assessment of the scope 3 screening, which means that if the company have the emission more than 40%, they need to include a separate target for scope 3. But if it is less than 40% and you're not seeing that one as a materiality, the company can opt to not developing the scope 3 targets. Yep, and of course, buildings are different here. Supply chain are complex and also many different types of the companies and also many policies involved in it. Therefore, what we're trying to acknowledge here is that SBTi right now don't want to create a new platform or new guidance. We want to build a sector guidance that provide companies the need to set the target and also building upon what is actually being developed previously here. The basis of the science-based target initiatives is still rely with the greenhouse gas protocol. So you may see that the greenhouse protocol has been around since the 90s. It provided the basis of how we define the scope 1, 2, and 3. But of course, there are a lot of, we receive a lot of amount of volume of queries from the building sector that it is not, the guidance is still insufficient. Therefore, Victoria mentioned that we will publish this by Q3 of this year, and we will encourage you to take part because we will definitely have like the public consultation during that time before the guidance is being published. Yep. Then while also waiting for the guidance to be published, what can companies actually do? First of all, is the commercial and residential 1.5 degrees Celsius global pathways are available in the SBTi tool here. And the company in the building sector also still can use the cross-sector guidance, which I previously mentioned here. Yeah, this is, I think, the request from Esther about why SBTs are becoming a must-have for the company here. We see that the SBTi is being talked a lot, not only by the company itself, but also different range of stakeholders here. The first one, investor and finance here. So of course, there are so many different types of the investors related net zero alliance or investor related net zero communities right now. So many investors are asking their portfolio companies to be Paris aligned here. And one of the standards that are being mentioned a lot is the SBTi. The second one, of course, is the client here. When we're talking with the companies from the Asia Pacific, I think because so many companies actually part of the bigger value chain of the big brands that already have their own SBTs. So the pressure is actually also coming from them. They are being asked to set their own SBTs so that the companies that purchasing them can do their own SBTs as well. And then SBTi are also being included in some of the reputational and risk, especially the ESG ratings, and of course the compliance here, because we see that the alignment between SBTi and also future carbon-related policy is happening right there. Yep, so I will close the presentation and giving back to Esther, and we are urgently calling on companies to joining the initiative and joining this 1,600 plus companies to also considering net zero as the roadmap. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dedy. It is now my pleasure to invite Dedy, Esther, and Joy to come to the front and take a seat to start the panel discussion.
Is the mic? Okay. The audience has been very quiet. I don't blame you, because after what Dedy say, scope 1, 2, 3, and if you are, not exceeding 40%, you don't need to report scope 3, and then you're like, what is my company? But I think there are a few facts that we need to know, and as corporate, we have actually gone through some of this pain, and in 2017, we started to actually have the ambition of like, hey, let's try SBTi, because some investor was saying that, whatever target you set, is it backed by science or you just dream up, a number? So we say, okay, let's try to do SBTi in 2017. And after 3 months, 4 months, when we submitted the first set of data and it was rejected. Oh no, okay. Then after 8 months, finally we went through, a lot, almost like can make a baby, 8 or 9 months. Then we sent a lot of data, and then, we talked to the science-based target, the scientists. They are not like people who can drink coffee with you, they don't talk to you or any other thing, they just want to look at your data. How do you project this one? How do you estimate? And so like, okay. I still remember 11 p.m., their US time, I was still talking to them. It was not an easy process, but it was a rewarding process, because you really think of things that you never thought of. Like Joy say, you don't know what you don't know. And that was exactly the experience. And in 2018, finally, we got it validated. And that was based on 2-degree warmer scenario. But of course, after that, IPCC say, no, folks, 2 degree not good enough, 1.5. So then, 2021, we started to look at, how do we align to 1.5 degree? And my team is here, like Ellen, and my green building team has gone through the pain again. It took us almost 5-6 months, right? And look at all the data again. How do we align 1.5 and raise the bar? So that was when just before December 2022, right after Glasgow, 21. Yeah, then we got it approved, validated, aligning with 1.5. It is honestly not easy. And just now, another fun fact that is most company has actually scope 3 more than 70 to 90% of their carbon footprint. So just now what he said, that point about below 40, you don't need to report, is forget about it. Every company has to report scope 3. And then scope 3 have 15 category according to greenhouse gas protocol. So our biggest footprint is not just embodied carbon from the building materials, but also investment. If you're a global company, you have to account for all your overseas subsidiary. Their footprint is our footprint. Their scope 1 and 2 is my scope 3. So they're almost everything. You imagine you are the parents here, you have all the children, grandchildren, nieces, nephew, subsidiary. Even my tenants, footprint is our footprint. And not just about the traveling of my staff and all. So it's a really, really mind-boggling exercise, but it's a necessary exercise because we all know that the whole world is looking at net zero. Not just investor set up the net zero asset owner in 2019, net zero. Then after that, 2021 July, the insurance company also have an alliance targeting at net zero. At Glasgow, there was the banking alliance. Everybody is pointing at net zero. So can a company survive without the support of investors, insurance for your assets, insurance, and also banks? So that's why just now Dedy mentioned that about all the acronym, you saw whether it is MSCI, sustainability, and CDP and all that. Those are real, endorsement that investor ask and also bankers ask for it. We rolled out the first green bond in 2017. They do look at our performance, whether you are on this, field, ESG ratings and ranking. So these are real, and just want to share with you. And for us as a procurer, we also need to engage our supply chain because your footprint is my footprint. That's why you saw all those like cement, steel, and all that. We are very calculative nowadays, the light and all the kilowatt hour. Apart from that, we look at all the materials, but we are still struggling to get data because a lot of suppliers are very new in the game. They really don't have the data. So I have a friend here, sustainability, Nicholas is here. So we have been asking for data. So Dedy, this is a question for you. How could you help us to get meaningful data that can meet the requirement of the scientists who are not very friendly? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Esther. And we will need to acknowledge first that it is a journey and it is not an easy journey. So what we're advising during the target setting in the SBTi is that you need to start counting your emissions first, scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. And whether you can get away the one that Esther mentioned, whether 40% is still there or not. Although, yeah, spoiler alert, you won't be. But yeah, the first thing is that you need to account for all of your supply chain, and don't try to be like starting from waiting until the data is being a high level type of the data. So we have some tools that are available, and the company may consider to counting start from the estimation type of the data. For example, you can easily convert the data from USD, from the spending or from the purchase to the CO2. And starting from there, you may start disclosing your data. I think that's the important part, because disclosing means that you have the responsibility to publicly showcase your data to the audience. And therefore, there's an effort and also there's a demand to increase your data over time. So disclosing the data is important because not only because probably, as I mentioned about the ESG rating, but also you will understand, you will analyze also what is missing, what is needed to be improved there. So starting from disclosure, and then when all of the things requirement already met, you may commit first to the SBTi, and you will have 2 years to develop the target here. And I believe right now the average time for companies to go from the commitments to the validated one is keep decreasing because, of course, right now the capacity and also so many partners, organizations working on this. But yeah, I think right now I would always encourage to start counting your data right now without without any further delay.
Yeah, certainly. Okay, so just now I talked about the finance, the business case and all that. Joy, we were in Bali with this APAC, on the on the workshop and all, and we can really feel the the excitement of the neighboring country, whether it's Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, at least, especially, they're all asking about finance, sustainable finance. Yeah, I know the technology is ready, but who is going to fund it? So they were very keen to learn more about sustainable finance. And just now you have the pillar, the framework, and what is your experience like, and what is your observations that how you can help real estate player in the region first, what really, the understanding of the procurement materials and the footprint, or technology, or solutions, or how can they get sustainable finance?
Right, this is really a lovely question. So first of all, the Bali was really amazing. So we really have that kind of fellowship and our friendship all together and discussing two very important things. One is green finance, the other one is embodied carbon. Right. So when we talk about green finance, actually we have the privilege to speak to both sides, the receiver and also the funder. So the receiver's perspective is that I need money, I need to work. So, and then I have a lot of good things, I need to really do things. But then the founder actually has all these questions that what can you do? How do you make money? What is your business case? How can I justify the cost? So there's always this question about how in between both of them. So then we start to realize that we have money. It's not like we don't have, we have a lot of founders actually are able to be distributed in the industry. So what is the gap that we need to close is to simplify our language so that they understand. It's not like they're not be able to, it's just that we need to help them understand what we do. And that part of education we cannot bypass. And then it needs also the good case studies to show them CDL has those funding, they do well, we can do as well. So we need a good case study and we need a simplified language to bridge the communication gap in between. And definitely, I think speaking for both sides, I'm very positive and confident that this can flow.
Well, it's all about partnership now. So I can actually observe that they are really want to do it. Nowadays, nobody asks why already. 10 years ago, whatever, they were still, why do we do it? Is it by law? If it's not by law, yes, let's wait. But nowadays, they all know that there is a strong business case. But now the question is how? So is it the biggest challenge that you have faced, when you deal with the APAC, all the developers, whether it is in Hong Kong or, Thailand and ASEAN region?
Yes, this is definitely a constant struggle. So from the show of hands, we already know, we believe it can happen, but do we have a clear pathway? Do we have a very clear vision that how step 1, 2, 3 are going to need to achieve that? Actually, a lot of us just face our own selves that is actually not that clear yet, because it's case by case. And there is a lot of dynamic in each of the projects. So in the way that how we can help the green building councils and things is to, first of all, I think the net zero readiness framework is what we have tried best to help. Through those pillars, we can give case studies. We can show you what other country has done in the way that in one page, in one glance, you have a sense about how ready I am and compare with the region. And maybe even in the future, how ready I am compared with the other part of the world. So in the way that your readiness is becoming more and more ready. So our readiness goal and the readiness goal is not going to lock like what we're doing today. In the future, everyone knows what you still talk about net zero definition is so clear. So we will definitely remove that part already and replace with something else. So it's an ongoing project with our partners, knowledge partners, to continue to help the industry to be more and more ready until we achieve that final goal.
I think CDP was one of the earliest to ask for like net zero climate strategy. We are quite familiar with, we are on 13 of such ESG ratings and rankings. So CDP was the earliest one actually. And then now actually, one of our ladies, our colleagues is here from GRESB also for Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark. So net zero is already on the agenda. We are already talking about it at the board level. So it is just a matter of time, whether 1 year or 2 years, that it will be included in GRESB. I think some of you are also reporting to GRESB, right? So I think, how are you going to plan to help, real estate sector, especially for both of you? The question is, it is not easy, you know, the questionnaire is really very, very tough, honestly, but very data focused. So CDP, do you have any plan, you know, to at least help, you know, the reporters, the corporates to really come up with data that you recognize? It is not easy. It's like we always also, like even sustainability, we have to bargain. Why you give me 0, huh? This one, because we have data. Well, why, you know? So I think now they don't really look at qualitative, you know, facts. They just need data. Yeah, what is your view, and how ready is actually the ASEAN region?
Yes, that is, I think, the question that I got a lot, right? From CDP point of view, I think what we're trying to do is that we run some tailored partnership with companies that want to go deep into some of the problem of their scope 1, scope 2, or scope 3. For example, we have the reporter surveys and also supply chain, which is basically addressing how to improve the response to the questionnaire and also how to get the data from the suppliers here, right? We need to acknowledge that the suppliers' capability and also capacity is limited. Sometimes they are coming from the small and medium enterprises, and sometimes they don't even know what climate change actually is. So we want to address that gap and providing some supply chain membership within the CDP. And I think it's proven a lot that it's effective in a way that there will be some tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers from them, and we can track definitely how to improve the scope 3 here. From the SBTi side, there will be an exciting opportunity in the coming months. We will launch the new tools called the Supplier Engagement Toolkit. So here, I talk about 2 types of the target, right, which is the absolute and intensity target. But for scope 3, actually, the company may also use the supplier engagement target, which is getting your suppliers to join the SBTi. That also counts as the engagement target. And we will launch this toolkit, which basically like becoming a tool for the company to, when they talk to the suppliers, how to get their data, what is actually SBTi in general, and also how to improve your performance over the time. So we will launch this Q1. So hopefully at least April, we can have that toolkits, and we'll be happy to share with you. And lastly, I think it's about also the initiative moving more global wide, but also we need to acknowledge that there are some regional contexts, right? Like real estate, of course, we're talking about the buildings in Asia. It will be pretty much different if we're talking about the somewhere in Europe, something like that. So right now we are trying to get some regionalization of the pathways, which will capture more the local context. For example, right now we're starting in the to launch the forest land and agriculture guidance, which is of course a big thing in Asia, and we developing a regional pathway specific for different regions here. And we want to duplicate that one to other sector, and probably building cement, all that high impact sample companies can also participate in that. So yeah, the regionalization and also the focus should be more, captured, because of course the region will be one region, and another will have different local context when it's talking about the emissions.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you just a little plug for CDP, they are not just talking about climate and carbon, they also have water, right? And also supply chain and forestry as well. So all these are all intertwined, because on our planet, all these, are all connected. Yeah. So, okay. Well, the tools, definitely we will need it. A lot of, company who are just starting out. And once you hear all the sustainability reporting standards and all that, you have the GRI, ISSB, and TCFD, TNFD, and GRI, and CDP. So there are a lot of acronyms. So in order for us to really survive in this so-called hot soup of acronym, it's really not easy. That's why we are going to plan like sector by sector. So today we focus on real estate sector first, which we are familiar with. Okay, so now I want to ask Joy, how painful it is. There are a lot of challenges, but you are always full of hope and all. So how can we really help to give that the positive outlook? And I think most importantly is solutions, lah. Yeah.
Right. So first of all, I'm optimistic about this. Again, I'm trying to really be that influence the industry to look at the positive way. But we do recognize that there are a lot of challenges and hurdles which you guys on the ground actually are facing. But one thing we realize, in order to achieve the challenges, the key thing is to simplify. It's only because we communicate today, but this is definitely not a key way to communicate. We communicate in data. We communicate by case studies. We communicate through messages. It's only your message and your data is simple, clear enough. You're able to send a clear message. So if we in the industry simplify things, that will be the key to address everyone's challenges.
Well, just now, Victoria, and you also talk about it's like the global goals, but you need to localize the framework and also the how. Okay, of course, Singapore is very clear with the SG, green plan, very clear, especially the pillar number 3, which is energy reset, that give us a lot of sleepless night, that to green 80% of all buildings in Singapore. So those are our government agencies are working really, really hard. So we are always chasing and running. So how are you going to help the Singapore players, whether we are as developer, asset owner, building owner, or supplier, or contractors especially? After COVID, honestly, a lot of contractors are struggling to meet the deadline and all. So how can World GBC help to step in to help them to deal with the so-called backlog and chase, to meet the deadline, and also look at the future, how to, look at decarbonization? Yeah.
Right. We really hope that we can do more. That's definitely something like it's a very important thing actually in our heart. So we also recognize that we really need to continue to value what we're dreaming of, because this will eventually help the sector ongoing. So when we have the dialogue with our green building councils like Singapore Green Building Council, the first thing is to help them to continue to help the industry. Although there is a layer behind, but we always wanted to channel, let's say, fundings, resources, and we can see that a lot of opportunity globally, like Women Business, IKEA Foundation, are actually focused on the Asia region already. There are dialogue in this. So we definitely wanted to bring the building industry into the limelight of those key events, let's say COP26, COP27. We see a greater presence of the building industry, and we're seeing that people started to pay attention to that. In that way, we're able to bring resources to Asia, or even more resources to where they're close to our home, to help us out in that way.
Yeah. And of course, we also have more and more training, and just plug in that we are going to have a training session, 8 days certified course for building sector. It is endorsed by NTU and designed by practitioner, and Joy is going to be the lead trainer, and quite a number of practitioners like us, experienced and all, to come and share how you can start your journey or step up your journey. Check out from NTU's program, and also my LinkedIn as well. And now I want to, offer the time for anyone in the audience. You have any question before we close in about, 8 to 10 minutes time. Any questions from the audience? Yes. Yeah. You want to introduce yourself? Yeah. Thank you, Dedy.
Hi, this is Waiman, from assistant editor from Eco Business. We cover sustainability issues in Asia Pacific, and I really wanted to just tap on the insights from Dedy, given that he's traveled so far from Jakarta to Singapore, and I think we talked about Singapore, but also about Malaysia, Indonesia, and the wider Southeast Asia region. I think Joy also mentioned in the region, people setting up governments pushing for the setting up of eco-cities. In Indonesia, we're seeing a new capital city, Nusantara. The fact that I think when we're talking about green buildings, getting that first step right in this instance might be a good example, whereby you get in fast when they're building a whole new city. But I wanted to understand, are there challenges, for example, in getting that first step in engaging during that process, especially with the difficult local context for different regions? And maybe you could share a bit more about the challenges in the Indonesia context. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to. I think, going back to my point, I think, going back to my previous point about the first time I encountered Esther was 2021, and during that time was Nobody wants to talk about net zero. Nobody wants to talk about SBTi. Nobody doesn't even listen what is climate change is. But right now, I think the demand is actually changing. Right now, we're the one that being chased. I think Joyce will be understanding about that one. I think that paradigm shift is happening right now. But of course, different market will speak different languages, and different market will have different types of the advanced, understanding about climate change and also urgency. When I'm talking with the advanced countries like Singapore, Japan, Australia, it's pretty easy actually, right? I can just send one email asking them to join, and next day they're already in the SBTi website, something like that one. But it's of course need to be tailored in the Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, as you mentioned. First thing first, I think it's about the language barrier here. So we need to acknowledge that this is very technical, even with the English-speaking, speaker. It's a very, very niche market, and so many jargons that I still learn as well here. So we need to acknowledge that there are need to translate, and also to have the expert that speak the local language to encourage them here. And then the second one is, I think we talk about policy side here, because this climate change agenda still being seen as a how to align this with the regulators, how to align with these national commitments here, which is not being seen yet in Indonesia. Right now, Indonesia is still separating their target between the NDC as well as the the private sector here. So there should be some alignment how these private sector commitments can be embedded also to the achievement of the NDC here, which I believe Singapore is on the right track, if I say that correctly. Apologize if not. But yeah, I think the question is going around and around about the business case here. The one that I already shared with you also, that what actually making climate change and also making these decarbonization pathways making a lot of business case. So we're bringing a lot of angle, we're bringing the investor angle, we bring the supply chain angle, we bring the policy angle. But yeah, in Asia right now, it's still an open market. We still don't know which one works the best. So we tried our best to, tailor this, which one the best. Yeah, I think that's rather short or long sharing.
Thank you. And actually, just very in line with the 5 pillars that you talk about. Of course, culture is really, it will take a long time to shape culture. So we don't have time to shape culture now. We need to talk about data. I remember the 5, right? Data, and then regulation. And government, and of course, technology is very important. Without technology and innovation, you don't even need to talk about net zero or super low energy. Yeah. So how do we? There's so many things, and everybody is talking about. You need to report before you even start practicing. You also have to report. Then some of the suppliers, why am I reporting? I don't know what I'm supposed to report. So what? How do you want to give them a 101 to really start? What will be the easiest step for them to really, really start?
The first step is to commit first. Right, to commit first. So the moment you're committing, actually in the World Green Building Council website, when we look at the commitment signatory, we have some step-by-step videos to share with everyone. Actually, the steps are only 5. You act, then you commit, and then you start to report, and then also verify. So it's actually a very clear roadmap for you to follow the steps. And then we can see the organizations, the procedure itself is not tedious, but what actually holding everyone back is really to generate that data that we need. Again, although we understand the data is difficult, but we really desperately need clear data for us to make sound and informed decisions. So that's why this is a collaboration between everyone, that we really need to focus on the right thing at this time.
Any other question that, the audience? Oh, I see a hand behind. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you very much. My name is Leah Nicholson. I'm the head of sustainability with Terrascope. So thank you for sharing this information. I was wondering, the International Energy Agency has the kind of pathway to 2050, and there's a really high profile role of zero carbon ready buildings. And, in addition, I guess, as well as the data journey that we've been talking about, from that building perspective, I was wondering what you see kind of zero carbon ready looks like, and having more examples of kind of physically what we're aiming for in different socioeconomic contexts. I think, Dedy, you mentioned what has been promoted in EU may not be applicable. So what does zero carbon ready look like in different socioeconomic contexts? And are we seeing enough of those examples? Thank you.
Challenging question. You want to give it a try? Yeah.
I think I'll also pass it to Joy later, but I guess going back to the basic definition of what is actually net zero, right? So I'm imagining myself there will be some advanced technology in the future, especially about the removals technology right now, which is probably very needed. And of course, to reach the net zero, there should be some balance with the emissions being going to the atmosphere, but also the carbon removals right now. Right now, we're seeing carbon removals not only coming from the land use related activities, right? Like the forest related activities, but also the carbon removals technologies that are advanced. That will be a key also, because as I mentioned in my slide, there are unabated emission that we need to admit it is almost impossible to reduce anymore. That 5% should be neutralized by the carbon removals here. So with many companies, having the net zero being validated and also getting their decarbonization journey pathways, there will be an increase of demand of the carbon removal technology in the future. I guess that probably my kind of, prediction kind of in the future. This will become like the big market because we need to tap into as well.
Joy, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, so in the World Green Building Council, actually we have a database for all the case studies. We're collecting case studies as well. And then every 2 years, we're running this Asia Pacific Leadership Award. So one of our key requirements is to achieve net zero like in the operation. So again, we actually have several great case studies from that award as well. So Southeast actually also one of the finalists in the award. So through all these platforms that we're able to collect good case study to inspire the industry about what is possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see another hand there. Yeah, okay.
Hi, Esther. It's David Ko from SMBC. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, this one's very important. You control money. Yeah.
Well, I might have a bit, which I like to lend for green initiatives. It's been a brilliant conversation and discussion. I always love these new insights, but a lot of our conversations with developers, main contractors, subcontractors, all the building material suppliers, I think when trying to keep pace with expectations around scope 1, 2, and 3 is the cost. What is the additional cost each and every player has to bear to supply the data? Because at some point, if once you define what data is required, I think many of us, even for myself, on behalf of the bank, is the fear of having multiple platforms that I have to subscribe to if people don't align and create that one platform. And we're okay if there's one platform for Singapore, another platform for Indonesia, another platform for yet another country like Malaysia, and so on and so forth. But if there's that one platform, is this a possibility? Because then it's so much easier, and there's a sharing of the cost. And I know certainly in Singapore, where the government, I would like to think, would be very much encouraging and perhaps might even help fund this. How can we make this happen and accelerate that process? Because certainly on behalf of SMBC, I can tell you, there's no shortage of appetite to fund green buildings. If anything, I think, there's a lack of green buildings and more money chasing these things. So please.
Yeah, we have SGBC here. James, please convey the message to BCA. There are a lot of fundings to, and looking for green building. But actually, this is a dream, David. You all know that, ESG, it's not easy. After doing it, we published 15 sustainability reports, and the conversation is still talking about, can we have one platform, one standard, so that we all can understand each other? But I think it is difficult because we are talking to a very diverse, geographical location. We are talking to different investors and different analysts. They're actually, according to the expert, there are actually 600 framework, ESG framework and standard and ratings and ranking. 600 in the world. So of course, it's not the more the merrier. If you look at our humble experience, we are now keeping about 10 of them. Okay, of course, the GRI, the SASB, the TCFD, the CDP, GRASB, and of course, GRI and CDSB, and there are a lot of acronyms. But we are hopeful that by the next quarter, according to ISSB, they are looking at how to harmonize and unify, simplify, but not one size fit all. We are actually, my hope is for a twin pillar approach, which is GRI's impact on people, social side, and the other one, which is the ISSB, more on the investor side. So after that, after this conversation, we can have John from CDP to probably talk a little bit about that. CDP and ISSB has actually signed an agreement that, you know, to include, right, ISSB, the climate reporting, and embrace your CDP companies as well. So we are working on that, but I'm not hopeful that there will be one platform. There's just too many platforms right now, and life will be easier for us as corporate if there's one platform. Yeah. So I don't know whether you have any thoughts on this before we wrap up. Yeah, I'm mindful of the time. Yeah.
Just one point. I think harmonization is the key here, right? One of the real examples is that when Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which is the basis for the SBTi, is developing the Scope 3 Category 15, which is the financial side, there are some other kind of competing one, which is PCAF, Partnership for Carbon Accounting Financials. And what they're trying to do is that to harmonize those PCAF and also the Scope 3 Category 15 to really not one size fits all, but to harmonize that. So right now, actually, when the company trying to set their targets, and from the financial side, they can use PCAF or the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. I think, yeah, harmonization is the key.
Joy, any thoughts?
Harmonization, collaboration, this is definitely the dream that we wanted to achieve.
Okay, I want to just wrap up the conversation with a little bit of, you know, positive note and all that. If those who are, you know, I don't want to use the old, mature enough to know about the dream about putting man on the moon in 1961. Not that I doubt that, but you read about it in 1961. There was, they want to set eyes on sending astronauts to the moon. 8 years later, it happened. So I always feel that there's always hope. I've been in this industry for 20 over years already. And of course, when I was at COP, I was elbowed by my scientist friend. He's like, why are you so positive? 2.7 degree, you know. I said, no, but if you don't do anything, it will be probably more than 2.7 degree. So we have to have hope all the time. So, well, we want to be positive. We also want to have solutions and be prudent about it. So what is your own thoughts about this? Is that hope? Is that solutions? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes, short and sharp and loud.
Completely agree, yeah. There is, then there should be, right? Yeah.
If you remember COVID, when we first started, anyone have COVID, we all very scared, right? Wow, almost like death sentence. But today, almost every other one has COVID already. There is always solution. There's always, cure for any problems. So with this, I want to thank, Joy and Dedy for sharing this, but there will be more coming. So look out for our, social media. And now maybe we can just get John to get into the hot seat to answer all the questions. We can just stay here.
Thank you, Esther. Am I doing Q&A? No, I'm not, right? Okay, so good afternoon, almost good evening, everybody. I'm only going to talk for about half an hour. Just kidding. I'm going to let you go home. So what a day. I mean, when I first came to Singapore, people used to say Singapore has no natural resources. We get our water from Malaysia. But I think for the month of February, we're going to be okay. But I pity those in solar industry. No one from Sunseap here, right? Sorry. My gosh. Global warming. Tough act to follow, really. Honestly, amazing presentation. So give you a big hand. Honestly, I really learned a lot here because I cover the region, but I kind of more broad than deep, and it's great to hear experts. So I was going to talk about CDP, but you know what? We have a new corporate video, and no one's shown a video today, so I'm just going to play a video.
We need change. By 2030, we need to have emissions end deforestation, and reverse nature loss, or the consequences will be catastrophic. At CDP, we are accelerating the rate of change through disclosure. Our insights are focusing capital markets, companies, cities, and governments on measuring and acting on their environmental impact. By driving transparency and accountability, we are challenging corporates and governments to build a thriving economy that works for people and planet. In 2022, more companies than ever before measured and acted on their impact on climate, forests, and water security, along with over 1,100 cities, states, and regions. 2022 saw a 62% year-on-year growth in disclosing companies in Asia-Pacific alone. But we're not stopping there. We're expanding our scope to cover more stakeholders and nature, from the ocean to biodiversity, providing the world's only standardized disclosure mechanism for emitters. As disclosure becomes mandatory, we lead the way, driving best practice and accountability across the globe. The climate and nature crises are here. We need change. Be part of the solution at cdp.net.
That's our new 2023 video. Thanks for bearing with us. I can stop there, can I? Right. So thanks once again, Esther, CDL, World Green Building Council. Thank you very much. CDP, we're a global non-profit. We've been going since 2000. We're at the forefront of disclosure. We have over 680 financial institutions that buy our data. Even the likes of MSCI use our data. So I'm pretty sure SMBC in the corner there buy our data. They cover 130 trillion in AUM. As you saw there, over 1,000 city, states and regions, Singapore, disclosed to us. Fantastic number. And we increased from 13,000 just over to 18,700 corporates and supply chain tier 1 members disclosed to us last year. And it's great to see Asia Pacific, as a global video, so it's great to see Asia Pacific mentioned as leading the way with plus 62% disclosure. After all, we make most of the world's things here, which is majority of people's scope 3. So with mandatory disclosure and regulation set to take effect, you've probably seen SGX launch their ESG genome. That is the start of a wish to have all listed companies mandatory disclose and even move on to SMEs mandatory disclosing. We're very optimistic that in Asia Pacific at least, and the home of the world's fastest growing economies, that this is showing great ambition to drive disclosure. Here at CDP, what we say is you cannot manage what you don't measure. So this is before SBT, before we get into SBT, you've got to set your own, you've got to know your baseline. So the likes of CDL have led that way. We're very privileged to have that long-standing partnership with CDL. By the way, the only A scorer in Singapore. Out of those 18,700 companies, only 300 of them in the world score A, which means that they truly have a plan to get to net zero. In fact, Esther is a AA scorer in climate change and water. So thank you. At COP27, we announced that we're going to incorporate ISSB, related disclosure standard, into disclosure platform. We've always done that with the best standards. We are at the forefront of TCFD. We run the knowledge hub for TCFD, and TCFD is incorporated in our questionnaire, so you don't have to do a separate one. You can just do a CDP questionnaire. And the data doesn't cost that much to acquire. And it doesn't cost that much to disclose either for you guys. So it's a great, this is a signal to our commitment in delivering robust environment for disclosure to the market, providing capital markets and other stakeholders this consistent, standardized environmental data. We cover 80% of the S&P 500, for instance. And it's just vital to the decision-making process. The likes of GIC buy our data to check the E in their ESG portfolio. East Springs use our data. Those are just a couple of examples out of the 700. So for more than 20 years, we've been driving change, capital markets, business, cities, governments. These entities must move further and faster to keep up with this momentum. All corporations must embrace their responsibility to measure and manage their environmental impacts at speed and scale. Really, truly urgent transformative action is needed. 2030 is a blink away. Disclosure, transparency, and data science data will be crucial to building a more resilient society. As we've learned from the pandemic and as well as from climate change, the best time for action is long before the problem started. It's better to be preventive than to find a cure, to be honest. So measuring and managing environmental risks through disclosure helps companies to build this resiliency. So built environment, well, 75% of all global emissions, GHG emissions, come from cities, and the built environment accounts for 37% of that, right? So it's one of the key sectors for decarbonisation and the reduction of CO2 emissions, both operational emissions and embodied emissions of materials. I think we need to have, I think assets could be stranded if they're not adequately prepared for the energy transition when carbon tax regimes are stricter and decarbonisation policies start to kick in around the region. Are there technologies that can support the real estate sector in decarbonisation? I think if you speak to Esther, you'll find that she's already adopting some CDBL like AMPT, which is replacing diesel generators on site, electrifying a lot of processes, cleaning the air. So there are solutions, small and big, that can be applied. Yes, and as Gresby has already highlighted, that plant equipment and efficiency measures could already help reduce those carbon footprints. On-site renewables, as I mentioned. In the region, buildings are also not a risk of impacts of climate change, are also at the risk of impact of climate change, sorry. And if the world doesn't decarbonise fast enough, the region is going to be more vulnerable. You've seen that with the recent floods in New Zealand. I heard today that there's an ice storm in Austin, Texas, which the last one was 2021, and it doesn't normally happen for 30 years. So they've had two in a couple of years. Power outages, people not being able to get online travel, to go to work. It's a real threat. So, as I said, at CDP, we say you cannot measure what you don't measure. So it's encouraging and energizing to see all of you here interested in decarbonisation, interested in hopefully disclosing and starting that process and being transparent and accountable and being more about people, planet and profit than profit. We always say disclosing is the first step towards environmental stewardship. Next step would be aligning your decarbonisation pathway to 1.5 degrees C scenario by committing, validating and setting your emission reduction targets with science-based SBTi and defining appropriate decarbonisation strategies. Hopefully, if we do this, companies in the building sector can accelerate the transition to the net zero economy and prevent the worst effects of climate change. So I have one last slide. I wasn't actually going to do any slides, but I have to show you this slide. So I've stolen this from my chairman, Paul Dickinson, who presented this slide at the Singapore FinTech Festival. Michael Porter is famous for the 5 forces, is the godfather of modern strategy. And we talked about money. I think there's $4 trillion was mentioned. We talked about mention of finance in the corner there from SMBC. So here's a snapshot. I don't have the global figures, but this is the US figures. As a non-profit organization, we have an office in America, we have an NGO status in America, so we're part of the $1.2 trillion in revenue or money that grants that we generate, revenue that we generate. Government through tax takes in about $3.1 trillion. What do corporations take if you think about Walmart, Apple, etc., etc.? So you guys in this room from corporates, you're the ones that can create the change because you're the ones that have the financial muscle to do it. They say you can't buy your way out of climate change, but actually, I'm not sure that's true because I think you can make the right investments and the right choices. So I'd just like to leave it at that and thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you so much to all speakers and everyone who has joined us today.